I'm going to jump in. Prime Minister Trudeau is speaking now. Let's listen in.
About the Ukrainian International Airlines tragedy that took so many innocent lives earlier this year. Even as we face this new crisis, families and loved ones continue to grieve and seek answers. I want to assure them and all Canadians that we have been working hard to get accountability and justice, even as we fight this pandemic. At the same time, we've also been developing a strategy with our other international partners to make sure that such a tragedy never happens again. Today, I'm appointing the Honourable Ralph Goodale as my special advisor for Canada's ongoing response to the downing of Flight 752. With his decades of extraordinary service to Canada, including as Minister of Public Safety, Ralph has the right expertise to guide our response to this air disaster and provide recommendations for best practices going forward. He will also continue to push to see families properly compensated. The second thing I want to do is share a story with you. A few weeks ago, Dave Caputo, the owner of a startup in Trustcore in the Waterloo region, called a meeting with his employees. With mounting concerns around COVID-19, Dave asked his team how they could repurpose their building materials factory to make products hospitals needed. A few days later, they had 4 prototypes drawn up. They decided to make large panels, which hospitals could use to subdivide rooms and isolate people with COVID-19 from other patients. Well, on Monday, panels made of fully recycled materials were delivered at no cost to several hospitals in the region, including Grand River, St. Mary's, and Guelph General Hospital. Dave and his team showed what Canadians do in difficult times. We don't back down from a challenge. We roll up our sleeves and we get to work. I know that this pandemic has been incredibly challenging for people right across the country, but we're also seeing the best of what it means to be Canadian. From coast to coast to coast, businesses are retooling to produce face shields, ventilators, hand sanitizers, and other supplies our healthcare professionals need. To make it easier for companies to help out during this critical time, we launched Canada's plan to mobilize industry to fight COVID-19 a little over a week ago. In the time since, we've spoken directly to almost 3,000 companies who've reached out to offer their help. Before we go any further, I want to thank all the owners and entrepreneurs and managers who've answered our call to action. This vital support comes at a critical time. And the way you looked around and said, not how can I keep myself safe, but how can I keep myself and my employees safe and help out in this critical time, is a real sign of leadership and a sign of what Canadians do best. In tough times, we pull together, we're there for each other, we put up our hands and we ask, how can we help? I also want, in the same vein, to thank everyone who's making, shipping, and delivering these products. People who work on the manufacturing sector and in terms of getting people the items they need are on the front lines of this fight. Our country needs you through these tough times, and we thank you deeply for everything you do.
When we announced the Canadian plan to mobilize the industry against COVID-19, we said that we were on the point of signing agreements with Spartan Bioscience and other companies of their ilk. Today, we're announcing the signing of supply contracts with 3 Canadian companies to manufacture medical equipment, respirators, surgical masks, and tests. I'd like to point to the work done by Minister Baines, who's played a leading role in concluding these agreements. We've also signed letters of intent with 5 other companies, Precision Biomonitoring, Fluid Energy Group, Irvin Oil, Calco Group, and Stanfields. And by mobilizing industry, we'll be able to produce here at home the goods that our healthcare professionals need to protect their own health, to treat treat patients suffering from COVID-19 and break the spread of the virus as well.
Our plan to mobilize industry. We said that we were close to reaching agreements with Thornhill Medical, Medicom, and Spartan Bioscience. Today, we're announcing that we have moved forward with contracts with these 3 Canadian companies to make medical supplies such as ventilators, surgical masks, and test kits. I want to recognize the great work Minister Baines has done to make this happen. We've also signed letters of intent with 5 other companies: Precision Biomonitoring, Fluid Energy Group, Irving Oil, Calco Group, and Stanfields. We know that the demand for critical equipment and supplies will grow in the coming weeks, so we need a sustainable, stable supply of these products. And that means making them at home, and we're optimistic that they will be available in the coming weeks. So today, I'm also announcing that our existing next-generation manufacturing supercluster will be leading companies in developing and scaling up new technologies to test and treat Canadians. Demand for these goods is going up, so we're making sure Canada is ready to keep up. That's why our government is also allocating $2 billion to purchase protective personal equipment, including for bulk purchases with provinces and territories. This includes things like more masks and face shields, gowns, ventilators, test kits and swabs, and hand sanitizer. Protective personal equipment is essential to protect our healthcare workers who are on the front lines of this fight. We recognize that more is needed, and everyone is working day and night to receive essential supplies. We're coordinating with the provinces and territories, the Public Health Agency, and the experts to make sure our healthcare workers get everything they need. This is a priority for our government, and we will continue to source new solutions every day. We're expecting shipments to come in the coming days, and we will continue to work tirelessly to get these supplies to where they're needed. Plusieurs entreprises ont également fait des dons d'équipements et de matériel.
Several companies have donated equipment and medical supplies to deal with COVID-19. Alibaba, for example, has sent 500,000 surgical masks and 10,000 test kits to help us out. COVID-19 Medical Support, which is an organization which brings together healthcare professionals, engineers, entrepreneurs, and representatives of NGOs, is working with several other companies to provide medical equipment. To date, they have obtained a commitment from Bombardier, from 3M, from Metronite to produce PPE. And Toys R Us has also committed to provide baby monitors to Canadian hospitals to provide for better communication between healthcare professionals and patients. These monitors will also help to prevent fruitless moving about by staff in hospitals, which can put people's lives in danger. I'd like to thank all those companies who have stepped up to the plate. You're doing your share, and all Canadians should follow your example.
We will need more masks, ventilators, and testing kits. But how many more we need depends entirely on you. If you stay home and follow public health recommendations, you can slow the spread. And that means fewer patients in our hospitals, fewer people to test, fewer ventilators to use on critical patients. So keep doing your part and help us keep Canada safe. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Nous allons commencer avec la période de questions par téléphone.
We'll start with the question period. We'll start with the people on the lines today. Moderator, over to you.
The first question, Maura Forrest, Politico. Your line is open.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Yesterday you were asked about pipeline construction continuing on the Trans Mountain expansion, and you said you'd have a better answer today. Now Jason Kenney is saying construction will start on the Keystone XL pipeline as early as April 1st. Do you have concerns about construction continuing on these projects? Do you think it should stop?
I can assure you that all Crown corporations, are following all the best medical advice. Je peux vous assurer que toutes les
Well, I can assure you, in fact, that all Crown corporations are following the advice given by our medical experts.
Politico?
Yes, I mean, that didn't really answer my question. I guess that means you're comfortable with construction continuing. But my follow-up question is about the wage subsidy. You initially promised it at 10%, then last week it was hiked to 75%, but still seemed to be targeted towards small and medium-sized businesses. Now it's available to all businesses. I'm wondering why you've taken such an incremental approach to this measure, given that you're now asking employers to hire back people that they've already laid off.
This situation has been evolving rapidly, as we all know. We're putting in place unprecedented measures to respond to the needs that people are expressing on how we're going to be able to get through this together, how we're going to be able to stay home, self-isolate, not go into work, and yet still be able to pick up our economy when we're through this particular crisis. That is the focus that we've had, and that's why what we're offering is a 75% wage subsidy to companies large and small, nonprofit sector and charitable sector included, so that people can stay on the payroll while they stay home and stay isolated, so that we can ensure that we do bounce back strongly from this once we're through this period.
Merci. Prochaine question.
Next question.
Next question. Mike Mansfield, the Canadian Press. Your line is open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. You talked about shipments coming in the coming days and the fact that more will be needed, obviously. So I think what I'd like you to do is, can you walk us through your decision-making process around the cabinet table, how you decide how these scarce medical resources will be allocated in the near future? How precisely in detail do you decide what goes where?
Thank you, Mike, for your question. It's a very good one, and I can tell you that we don't decide around the cabinet table. It is not politicians who decide how resources are allocated. We rely on experts, on medical officials, on coordination between medical officials in all different provinces to make the determination on where things are most needed, and we follow the direct advice of medical experts in terms of how to ensure that everyone, everywhere, has the equipment they need.
Follow-up question?
So what input? Yes. So what input then are you looking for from provinces and municipalities as they struggle with this? And does this ramp up of Canadian production, is this a reflection that this has to be a made in Canada solution? We can't rely on exports or imports from the United States, let's say?
We continue to work very, very closely with the provinces to know exactly what the needs are, what the supplies are, where potential gaps might be appearing, depending on trend lines and different modeling. We are in constant communication to ensure that the resources needed in different parts of the country will get there exactly when they're needed. And on the second question, yes, on procurement, the entire world is trying to get its hands on the various equipment needed to fight this virus. That is why we know that it'll be important to be able to have made in Canada solutions. And I am incredibly, incredibly proud of Canadian companies, Canadian suppliers and manufacturers who are stepping up and saying, we want to help, we will help make ventilators, we will help make masks and gowns and all the things that we are going to need in the coming weeks. It has been a truly amazing and inspiring story to see how many factories and manufacturers are stepping up. In the meantime, we're continuing to work very hard on procurement solutions to get the items that we need for the coming weeks. Je suis d'abord extrêmement inspiré.
I'm extremely inspired by what the manufacturers and the Canadian companies have been doing, and we acknowledge that there is a great demand across the world for this very same equipment, and it's going to be important to have solutions, made in Canada solutions as well, that are going to help us to ensure our own needs over the next weeks and months to come. In the meantime, we are working with all the provinces to make sure that we meet their needs and coordinate and ensure that everybody has the equipment necessary where they need it. At the same time, we are working to make sure that deliveries of the same equipment will happen over the next few days. Next question, moderator. The next question, Émilie Bergeron from Agence Clinique. Yes, the floor is yours. Yes, hello, Mr. Trudeau. I would like to know what kind of insurances you've had on the part of companies, the new 5 ones that you've mentioned, that they're going to be able to produce materials in times to respond to the needs. We are trying to accelerate these processes, but we acknowledge that this will take some time and perhaps a few weeks before all of this equipment be able to be delivered from our Canadian manufacturers. This is why we are continuing to receive shipments from materials from all over the world. Another question from Madame Bergeron. Yes, and for Medicom, who was going to be producing masks, N95 masks, how many masks are going to be or are presently ready or will be shortly ready? I do not have that information presently, but I know that there will be a press conference after this one where more details will be provided about the procurement. Last question, moderator. Next question, Marie Vastel from Le Devoir. Yes? Yes, hello, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to get back to the construction work which is happening for the Trans Mountain Pipeline. You said that you are following the advice of medical experts, but there are Indigenous communities that are very worried about seeing workers coming back and forth in the region. Why not suspend the work in order to protect them from a potential contamination? We understand how the Indigenous communities around the world are vulnerable, and this is why we have taken special measures around the country to ensure that COVID-19 not be propagated in those communities. They are already living a lot of stress from the medical system because of the number of people living per household. We know that there's a lot of things we need to do. Relative to the Trans Mountain Pipeline, I am confident that the company is taking all necessary steps to ensure safety. In English? I have another question on another subject. On the CERB, are you afraid that this might be is going to dissuade certain people, because it is actually more generous than working minimum wage? Isn't this going to dissuade people from working, and that some people would rather claim the CERB than rather than continuing to work? Well, I understand that we're in a very difficult position right now, and what is important is to make sure that people be able to isolate themselves and distance themselves to keep themselves and their families safe. We also acknowledge that certain jobs are more essential than others. I'm quite confident that working with the provinces, we are going to make sure that what has to be done continues to be done, while ensuring that Canadians have the necessary funds to be able to continue to pay their groceries, pay their rent, and this is something that we will continue to work on together.
People need money to be able to stay home and pay their rents and be able to buy groceries. This is a situation that is unprecedented, and it was really important for us to get money into people's pockets quickly. We recognize that there are going to be challenges around certain essential services, and we're going to work with the provinces, and we're going to encourage people to find solutions that will allow people to stay safe while they continue to do the job they need to do.
Prime Minister, I'm wondering, you've talked a lot, and your cabinet ministers have talked a lot about there being enough protective gear for healthcare workers, but we're hearing from healthcare workers that they're being rationed. and that they're concerned, that they're afraid to go into work. How do you explain that difference, I guess, between their perspective and the government's?
I think one of the issues that we're facing with is we're looking at a number of different models where worst case scenarios are fairly dire, but the expected track is reasonable and something we think we're going to be able to manage. I think healthcare workers and everyone needs to keep in mind what the potential worst case scenarios are, and that's why it continues to be so important, not just for us to prepare for every eventuality and be very careful and responsible about how we use the equipment we have, but also impress upon Canadians how important it is that the decisions you make today, whether you go out and how you go out, if you do go out, will have a direct impact on the need that healthcare professionals will be facing a week from now, 10 days from now. That's why it is so important for everyone to keep pressure off our healthcare system by staying home, by making sure that you're making smart choices to keep us all safe.
Pour faire un peu un suivi, M. Trudeau, bonjour.
Christian Noël, Radio-Canada. To follow up on Brian's question, we have nurses who are telling us hospitals are asking us to take masks, bring them home, wash them, and reuse them the next day at the hospital. Are we in such a situation of dire shortage that the professionals are endangering their health? Well, we are at a time when we have to be ready for every possible situation, and we need to be responsible and look at how we can make sure that we have the sufficient amount of protective material to ensure the days to come. But I can assure you that we are working day and night to make sure that deliveries happen of all equipments. We are working with companies, Canadian companies, to produce more equipment, and we are reminding Canadians that the choices they are making today, that we are making today, by staying at home or by going out, are going to have a direct impact on the needs that the healthcare system will have within a week or 10 days. And this is why we all have to do our part.
It's extremely important for everyone to do their part in staying home, in making sure that a week from now, 10 days from now, we aren't overwhelmed in our healthcare system. We are looking at a range of models that could lead to different outcomes. We're, of course, preparing for the worst case scenarios, but working towards and certainly hoping for a best case scenario. But that entirely depends on citizens being responsible in their choices. As for decisions made by medical professionals on managing the supplies that they have, I can only salute them for the work that they're working so hard and the decisions they're making to keep us all safe as a country and to keep themselves safe so they can keep keeping us safe.
On the
international level, there's like a mini war going on for the buying of such medical provisions. Are you worried that Canada is going to find themselves without? There are many things that we should be worried about in this situation. The health of Canadians, first and foremost, and of course the health of our health workers who are working to make sure that we are all safe. We are working with our embassies on an international level to make sure that supplies of other medical equipment be happening, and certainly we're going to be receiving things in the next few days. We are doing our utmost to get deliveries into Canada, but it's also so important to create industry that is going to be able to supply such equipment right here at home and have our own supply chain that is entirely made in Canada. And this is precisely what we are doing. And I want to thank once again all businesses and manufacturers who have been able to adapt their production lines and start making this equipment for Canada and the rest of the world.
We are, of course, working hard to make sure that we receive shipments of needed supplies in the coming days. And I can assure you that our embassy staff around the world is strongly engaged in exactly that. But that's also why it is so important that we have made in Canada supply chains to provide us with this essential equipment for the coming weeks, for the coming months. And that's why I am so pleased to be able to thank the manufacturers and producers across this country who've switched their production over to making this necessary medical equipment because it will ensure that we have solutions in Canada that will cover our needs.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Olivia Stepanovich, CBC News. The Americans are said to be most aggressively scooping up personal protective equipment on the international market. I'm wondering if you've found that to be the case, and if so, if you have prevailed upon President Trump to work together to come up with a common North American strategy so you can quickly ship ventilators and other personal protective equipment across the continent to priority areas.
We are working very hard to ensure that Canada receives the equipment that we need, both in the short term and in the medium term, creates production facilities to ensure that we can cover our needs. We understand that countries around the world are taking their own approaches. We will continue to coordinate as much as possible, but every step of the way, our priority will be ensuring that Canada is able to take care of its own.
But are you working with President Trump on a North American strategy? And also, can you tell us exactly how much medical gear has been deployed and delivered so far?
We have been able to cover all our needs up until this point, and expect to be able to cover our needs for medical equipment in the foreseeable future. But that is why it is so important for us to ramp up domestic production as well. And with the United States, we continue to coordinate on a broad range of issues. Nous allons continuer de coordonner avec les Américains sur.
We will continue to coordinate with the Americans on a variety of issues, but of course our goal is to make sure that Canadians have enough equipment to keep themselves safe and healthy.
Delivered so far?
That's a question for the ministers who will be addressing this a little later today.
Brian Mullen, Global News. Prime Minister, with rent due tomorrow, many small and medium-sized Canadian businesses are worried about paying their landlords. What can the federal government do? Is rent forgiveness in some shape or form on the table?
We've already worked with CMHC to ensure that many mortgages are able to be deferred. We've put more money in the pockets of businesses, or putting more money in the pockets of businesses through this wage subsidy, the 75%, that will take off a significant amount of pressure. We've also made available a $40,000 loan for small businesses through the banks that'll be interest-free for the first year, and as they go through it, $10,000 of it under certain conditions will be non-repayable at the end. So there are direct measures for companies to be able to get the liquidity necessary to get through the coming months so that we can be strong once we get through this crisis at the end of it.
2 First Nations communities in Manitoba and other communities are requesting military hospitals be set up. Is this something that the government is contemplating for remote communities with limited access to health care?
We know that our military, the men and women of our military, are always ready to serve, to help in a broad range of ways Canadians who need that support. The field hospitals is certainly an expertise that the Canadian Armed Forces have, and they will make determinations, and we will all make determinations about how we can and where we can best help if it comes to that.
Hi, Prime Minister. Molly Thomas, CTV National News. Canadians, of course, are putting lots of money on their credit cards. They're raking up interest. Last week, you had mentioned that you had talked to banks about possibly deferring that interest. Any more movement on that?
Those conversations continue with the banks. We're also looking at ways of easing access to credit for individuals so that they can shift their bank balances and their credit card balances to a lower interest line of credit. These are things that we're continuing to work on because we recognize that Canadians don't want to come through this with impossible levels of debt, and we're going to be there to help them out.
In French, please.
Okay. Nous reconnaissons que
we understand that we do not want to find people indebted at the end of this crisis, and so we will be helping out through the CERB and the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, but we also know that we can work with banks, and we are going to encourage them to make changes to the credit card rates, and we're also examining the possibility of access to lines of credit for individuals so that they can get loans or other situations that might cost them less in credit.
China is going to allow Canadian exports of canola. Can you confirm that? And is this a thaw in relations between the two countries?
I think we're recognizing that we're in a global situation where it is really important for countries to work together. We have seen promising signs of positive relations on specific issues, and we're going to continue working to try and ensure that our farmers, our manufacturers, our exporters continue to have access to the markets around the world, even in this difficult time.
Okay.
Nous allons continuer de travailler avec.
We're going to continue to work with our farmers, our producers, to make sure that they have access to markets for the goods. We recognize, of course, that this is a time when people have to work together. All countries must work together on this effort. I'm very pleased to see promising signs that that's actually happening despite disputes.
Okay, so that was Justin Trudeau. He spoke on a number of issues, including using the military if action is needed to help ease the burden of the frontline healthcare workers. So there we have it, and we will talk to everybody later on. Thank you for listening to Depictions Media.